Welcome to another exciting new episode of Talking About Stoicism with B.R.E. Brown. We're going over the moral letters by Lucius Annaeus Seneca, and we have landed in letter 50, which I found a nice letter that deals with issues that I think we face today. It's not particularly long, but about a page and a half, but I wanted to read it to you in its entirety. From Seneca to Lucilius, greetings. Because I received your letter many months after you sent it, I did not think it worth my while to ask the bearer how you were doing. He would need a good memory to tell me that, but I hope that you are now living in such a way that I know how you are doing no matter where you are. What other endeavor do you have than to make yourself a better person each day, to lay aside some error, to come to understand that what you think are flaws in your situation are in fact flaws in yourself? For we sometimes blame times and places for faults that in fact will travel with us wherever we go. You know that my wife has a fool, Harpaste, who has long remained in my household as an inherited dependent. I myself have a great aversion to these persons kept for show. If I ever wanted to be amused by a fool, I do not have to look far. I laugh at myself. That's an outstanding line. This woman, then, the fool, has suddenly lost her sight. It is scarcely credible what I am telling you, and yet it is true. She does not know she is blind, but asks her attendant over and over for a change of apartments, saying that her quarters are not well lit. You should be well aware that what we laugh about in her case happens to every one of us. No one realizes he is grasping or avaricious. The blind at least request a guide. We wander about without one and say, it's not that I'm ambitious, this is just how one has to live at Rome. It's not that I overspend, it's just that city living demands certain expenditures. It's not my fault that I'm prone to anger, that I do not yet have any settled plan of life. This is just what a young person does. Why do we deceive ourselves? Our trouble is not external to us, it is within, right down in the vital organs. The reason it is so difficult for us to be restored to health is that we do not realize that we are sick. Our infirmities are very numerous and very grave. Even when we do begin the healing process, how long might it take to rid ourselves of them? And as yet, we are not even looking for a doctor. Nor is the condition to be treated of recent onset. If it were, the matter would be relatively simple. The doctor would show the right way, and our mind, still young and impressionable, would follow. If it is difficult to guide us back into our natural path, it is only because we have deserted it. We blush to learn excellence of mind. But for heaven's sake, is there any shame in seeking instruction in so great a good? For there is no hope of the alternative, that it should arise in us by chance. One has to work at it. But the work is not hard, provided we start in time, as I said, and begin to shape and straighten the mind before its perversities become ingrained. Yet, I do not despair even when they are ingrained. Sustained, concentrated effort can overcome any resistance. Oaken beams can be straightened, no matter how warped they are. Crooked tree trunks are unbent by heat, and altered from their native form to whatever shape we require. How much easier is it for the mind, a thing suppler and more yielding than any liquid, to assume a new form? For what else is the mind but breath, disposed in a certain way? And you see that breath, being lighter than any other material, is by the same token more adaptable. It is true that we are now inhabited by vice, and have been so for a long time, but this does not mean, my dear Lucilius, that you should give up hope. No one acquires an excellent mind without first having a bad one. All of us have been taken over already, and to learn virtue is to unlearn one's faults. Yet we may be of good cheer as we tackle the job of self-correction, for once we do come into possession of the good, it is ours forever. One does not unlearn virtue. For contrary properties, those that are where they do not belong remain unsettled, and thus can be dislodged and cast away, but whatever comes into its proper place abides steadfastly there. Virtue is in accordance with our nature, faults are inimical to it. But even as virtues once attained cannot depart from us, and keeping them is easy, so also it is arduous to begin attaining them. For it is characteristic of a mind that is weak and ill to fear what it has not yet experienced, so that it has to be forced to make a start. After that, the medicine is not bitter, indeed it gives delight, even as it effects the cure. With other sorts of treatments, pleasure comes after healing. Philosophy, though, is one and the same, one and the same time, both curative and sweet. Farewell. There's a lot in that letter, but I think there are some really, really cool passages in it. So I love this bit of, for we sometimes blame times and places for faults that in fact will travel with us wherever we go. I talked about that in a previous video, so I'll be very, very brief about it here. People often have the idea that they can go somewhere else and make a new start and everything will be better, but often it's not. Because if you have not changed, merely changing the surroundings typically will not change the issues at hand, will not change how you act, what happens to you, how you feel. That does not really get affected by a mere change of circumstances. So that's an important point. I really love this analogy with the blind person. No one realizes he is grasping or avaricious. The blind at least request a guide. We wander about without one and say, it's not that I'm ambitious, this is just how one has to live in Rome. It's not that I overspend, it's just that city living demands certain expenditures. It's not my fault that I'm prone to anger, that I do not yet have any settled plan of life. This is just what a young person does. That, I think, is something that many of us, if not all of us, do. At one time or another, we say these things. Well, yeah, I spend a lot of money this month, but, it's good to treat yourself once in a while, etc. These are matters, these are examples of cognitive dissonance reduction. You know that you've done something, right? You kind of feel bad about it, so you come up with a rationalization, in a nutshell. I know that classic example from my good old social psych textbook that I was taught from in my first year of psychology. I know that bacon is not great for me because it contains nitrates and all that, but it also has some fats, and some fat is good for you, so it's okay for me to eat bacon. Like, this would be a rationalization, right? Cognitive dissonance. There is something, I'm eating this, I like it, but hey, it's actually not good for me, but I like it, but it's not good for me, but how do I end that disparity? Oh, you know what, but it has some fat. Some fat is good for you. You should have something. You should eat a little bit of fat once in a while. It's good for you. People do this all the time. And he gives excellent examples of that. It's not that I'm ambitious. This is just how one has to live in the big city. Right? So we do that all the time, kind of fooling ourselves, I think. And once you become aware that you're doing this, it becomes a lot easier to stop it. Think, yeah, wait a minute, what am I doing? Actually, etc. Stoicism, I think, is to a very, very large extent continuous introspection, right? Thinking about what you are doing, why you are doing what you are doing, how you can change what you are doing, if it would be wise to change what you are doing, if it's good to keep doing what you're doing, etc. Continuous, reiterative introspection. Maybe retrospection too, but introspection is what I was trying to say. Think about what you do. Why am I saying this? Why am I feeling this? Should I be feeling this? If I shouldn't be feeling this, why am I feeling this? And how can I stop feeling this? Etc. Very important, crucial tenets in Stoicism. Our infirmities are very numerous and very grave. Even when we do begin the healing process, how long might it take to rid ourselves of them? And as yet, we're not even looking for a doctor. Often we know that specific things, I'm kind of putting this in quotes, but are wrong with us. We have things that we need to work on, but we don't work on them. And that's because we often don't acknowledge to ourselves that we have some things to work on, because nobody likes to admit that about themselves. But it's true, though. It's true that we do. Everybody does. Everybody has things that they can improve on, right? Except for me, because I'm perfect. No, it's not true. I have many things to work on, and I try to do so. Right? I try to do so. And when you try, that's a good first step. Keeping it up is the most important step. But that's a good first step. But for heaven's sake, is there any shame in seeking instruction in so great a good? For there is no hope of the alternative, that it should arise in us by chance. One has to work at it. But the work is not hard, provided we start in time, as I said, and begin to shape and straighten the mind before its perversities become ingrained. Of course. I often use this analogy, which I certainly don't think is mine, but when I teach memory, right? Memory is like, creating memories is like walking up and down a lawn. And if you do that once, nothing happens. But if you keep walking up and down the same path on a lawn, at some point the grass will be gone and there'll just be sand, right? You have created that pathway. And this is what we do in our behavior too, right? Especially maladaptive behavior, rumination, keep continuing to think back and negative thoughts that can be destructive for your mood, for example. But we do that because once we start to do it, we do it more and more, and we keep doing it, and it keeps up, and it really creates that pathway in the lawn. And once that pathway is there, you can get rid of it. You can get rid of it, but the more destroyed the lawn is, the harder it becomes to restore what you were trying to do. It's still possible typically, but it takes time and a lot of effort, right? The more ingrained that pathway becomes, the harder it becomes to truly change that. And the longer it takes, the more effort it requires. So the earlier you start, the better it is. And Seneca knows this. Yet I do not despair even when they are ingrained. Sustained, concentrated effort can overcome any resistance. Yeah, and maybe that overcoming that resistance will require some professional assistance. But certainly it is typically possible, right? It is true that we are now inhabited by vice and have been so for a long time, but this does not mean, dear Lucilius, that you should give up hope. No one acquires an excellent mind without first having a bad one. That, I think, is a beautiful way to put it. Out of the darkness comes the light, right? It can be war up there, but if you can learn, and again, that may require some professional help, but if you can learn to dial that back, to be more in charge of what you are doing, things become a lot easier. It takes effort, it takes energy, and you may have all kinds of feelings about it, that it's not fair that you have to do that, etc. But when you truly invest in that and commit to it, it can be a huge difference, right? There can be a huge difference in how you feel and how much better you feel, but you do have to do that thing. For it is characteristic of a mind that is weak and ill to fear what it has not yet experienced, so that it has to be forced to make a start. After that, the medicine is not bitter. Indeed, it gives delight even as it affects the cure. With other sorts of treatments, pleasure comes after healing. Philosophy, though, is at one and the same time both curative and sweet. That's the idea of Stoicism, right? It'll help you stay calmer, stay more rational, becoming the best version of yourself you can be, but you have to start, and starting is difficult. Maintaining is difficult too, but the first steps are the hardest, because you are changing the way you think. It took me a long time. I read Marcus Aurelius, I read Epictetus, when I was not truly ready for it. And although I love the philosophy of the Stoics, and although it immediately appealed to me, I was not consistent enough in applying it, and as a result, the results were mediocre at best. I have to quote Yoda. A Jedi has the most serious mind, the deepest commitment. I think he said it the other way around. Anyway, it's true for Stoicism too. If you want to be a Stoic, you must have the deepest commitment, a most serious mind. You must truly make effort to put these principles into practice again and again and again. Doing it once or twice is not enough. Letting up is not a good idea, because you will slip and slide. You have to keep it up, and keeping it up is hard. It takes energy and effort, but I can guarantee you, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, because it's simply a mental skill. And like any skill, you can learn it, you just need to practice, practice, practice. 10,000 hours to become a master at anything, right? So, Stoicism too, again and again. And in doing so, you'll fail. A number of times you'll fail. But if you're able to not give up, crawl back up, and continue doing what you were doing, you won't make that mistake again. And maybe you'll make it again. But then after that, you won't make it again, because then you've done the same thing twice, right? And this is just how you continue to polish yourself. It's a somewhat overused analogy, but everybody, I think, is a diamond in the rough. We can just choose to polish ourselves, or not. But if we don't, you pay the dearest cost. Because at the end of the life that you will lead, you will know that you have not done everything you could do to become the best version of yourself you could be. And then you'll regret it. But if you make that effort, every time, polishing a tiny little facet of you, you become a shinier and shinier diamond. Be like a diamond, my friend. It's possible, but it takes effort. And if you can make that sincere effort, the sky is the limit as to what you can achieve. B.R.E. Brown, motivational speaker. Hire me for your interesting parties and events. I do think it was an outstanding letter, though. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with this one. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you feel about this. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope this was useful. I'll gladly see you again next week for more talk about Stoicism. Bye! 2, 1, 16 minutes.